Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started with our paper session on this lovely Friday morning. But we're going to bring up our first speaker. We're going to get this started. We're going to welcome Dale Smith from Bowling Green State University. Please give him a nice, warm welcome.
Okay, good morning. In the past year, I've done 3 independent studies, or students have done 3 independent studies under me, 1 on mythology and 2 on music composition. So I'll talk briefly about each of those. So the mythology one, we were going to do Inuit mythology and Southwestern mythology. She was more interested in Inuit mythology, so we focused on that. And then partway through, we castled to fairy tales, because I was curious if very many fairy tales had a connection with astronomy, with the sun and the moon. The answer was there were very few connections. But the Inuit mythology is from the Inuit people who were in northwest or northeast Canada and Greenland. And one of their heroes was Nanook, who was the great bear spirit. And Nanook is connected with the sky. There was a pack of dogs chasing Nanook. They didn't see the end of the world, and the dogs went up in the sky and became the Pleiades. Then the second, and I need to warn you that 2 of the 3 remaining items involve rape. So don't all walk out on me. One of the Inuit mythologies was Sequoia and Tatkim, who was her brother. And Sequoia was sleeping in a castle, and a stranger entered her room and raped her. And then she discovered that the stranger was her brother. And so she chased her brother and partly put out the light he was hearing. So he became the moon, and she became the sun. The sun is brighter than the moon. And then in fairy tales, there's Jack and Jill, which, as you may know, is really an astronomical poem. And Jack was the right side of the moon. The 2 characters, Jack and Jill, were abducted by the moon god, and Jack appears first. He's on the right side of the moon as the moon goes through its phases. Then both Jack and Jill appear, and then Jack gradually disappears, and Jill remains. And then Sleeping Beauty. You've all heard of Sleeping Beauty. The true version is not the Walt Disney version. Okay. And the original title was Sun, Moon, and Talia. When Talia was born, the astrologers predicted that bad things would happen to her. And later she was assisting a lady who was spinning flax and got a prick in her finger, and she went unconscious. Now, the astrologers predicted she would die, but her father got that commuted down to just eternal unconsciousness and put her in one of his castles. And then the king, who was out hunting, we all know the kings do bad things. The king came in the castle, saw Talia, saw she was beautiful, did what kings do, and 9 months later, still unconscious, Talia gave birth to twins. And then one of the twins started to suck in her finger and dislodged the little piece of flax, and Talia woke up. And then the king rediscovered her and now the king was married, there was the queen, but the king brought her out to the castle, and the queen wanted to kill her and the 2 kids, but the king intervened, saved them, and the king married her. So, weird events. But that was, and the 2 kids were named the sun and the moon. That's not a strong connection. Those were the only connections we found. I've got a book of Grimm's fairy tales, which somebody was saying is really, some of them are really grim. And my student looked through a good share of the tales in that book, and there were no other ones with astronomical connections. Then two of the independents that I did involve music. One was the Temple of Immensity. It's done. It led to a senior honors recital. I had the student with me last fall and spring. He led to a 28-minute recital featuring a choir, a 16-voice choir, and electronic music underscoring it. What he wanted to show was the distance and the majesty of the nearest stars. And so he took the 50 nearest stars, which lie within about 15 light years, set up for his timing, set up a scale where each hundredth of a light year was one beat. And when you did the arithmetic, that added up to about a 25-minute recital. Okay. Oh my gosh. And so he determined the duration of a star by luminosity, determined the dynamics by the radius of the star between triple F and double P. The choir sang for 7.5 minutes, was silent for 17.5 minutes, which was the distance between the stars. The electronic music was the constant humming under both with the choir singing and the choir silent, and the goal was to inspire people to reflect on the majesty of the universe. And this is a page of his music around Alpha Centauri. The other student involved was last spring and this fall. She's doing it's not really the planets, it's called Pale Blue Dot, but it's inspired by Holst. And we're all familiar with Holst, who of course was writing astrologically, not astronomically. And Caitlin wanted to do astronomy. So last spring, she did an independent with me. She didn't know any astronomy coming in, but learned about the planets and developed a table of the physical properties of the planets that she wanted to have incorporated in her music. The planets, she has an ensemble, which includes the saxophone that she plays, and then clarinet, trombone, cello, percussion, and piano. And she does the planets in order of distance from the Earth, not the sun. And so it's Venus, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. The duration of each piece is proportional to the radius of the planet, so Mercury is very quick. Jupiter would have been half an hour, and that was shortened to 6 minutes by the composer. Just quote some other works from Holst, obviously, from Wagner's Ring Cycle for Saturn and Uranus. Herschel, of course, discovered Uranus. He was a musician, and just quotes from him, and Dvorak, quotes from Dvorak's Largo on Venus. She uses pitch. Mars is a high pitch because it's cold, and Mercury has both high and low pitches because Mercury can be very hot or very cold. She's got contrasts on Jupiter, the contrast between the belts and the zones, and she'll introduce it with some comments and some pictures. Her performance is 2 weeks from Saturday, so looking forward to that. Questions?
Let's give Dale a round of applause. And I'd like to.
So, yeah, I have a question, and you touched on some very sensitive topics for people, and I've encountered I don't even know how I would approach some of those under the dome with, say, the public, but talking about like the myths surrounding Callisto, I've, whether it comes to school children or in public shows, I've encountered people who that really, telling those stories, and even Joe Hopkins style, like from Bear Tales and Other Grizzly Stories. Um, I've encountered folks that it really runs counter to their sensibilities. And do you have any suggestion how to address that?
Very carefully. I would not say 2 incidents of rape in front of a public audience. I would find a more gentle way to say that.
Old Zeus seemed to have some issues there.
Yeah. Yes.
Any other questions for Dale? All right, let's give him another round of applause. Thank you, Dale.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. Our next speaker is Jean Creighton from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Big round of applause for Jean.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Just quick show of hands. How many of you know what design thinking is? What term, is this a term you've heard before? Okay, so it's not crazy to introduce the term then. We had a chance, we had a chance with Robin to go to the D School. So this is in Stanford. This is a place where there's a lot of talk about design thinking. And the idea is that you can use principles from design to address other problems, both in learning and education, but also in business and in other places. So they'll talk about solving, defining problems, innovating, learning, shaping the future even. And I think that was their secret agenda, how to transform education. That was their secret and not so secret agenda. So you may see this if you Google design thinking. You're going to get pictures that look like this, how to empathize, how to define, how to ideate. I'm not going to talk about all of this, nor am I going to give you a beat description of what the workshop was like. If you have a chance to go to Stanford for this workshop, take it. We got funding from our local Lubar Entrepreneurship Center, which I will give you an action item for you later. I'm going to stick on the 3 things that I found was most interesting and important and how I use that in my dome. The first idea is how to develop community and culture, which is tied in very much in how we learn. The second one is how to find and scope problems. And the third one is how to put ideas in practice, how to make things change. So the 4 things we use to learn, the context that we need to learn, is what is relevant to us, what makes us actively engaged and reflect, how do we engage emotions, and finally, how can we learn best from and with others. So context, I am teaching a course called Search for Life in the Cosmos to first-generation students. Most of them are people of color. The day's topic was the Drake equation, that is how many communicable civilizations we have in the galaxy. I looked around in the room and I thought, these people are not ready to talk about the Drake equation. They have big concerns, they look tired. 2 of my students had teeth abscesses. I mean, it was going on and on. So I said, okay, people, how about we talk about what we do for our physical and mental health? Share your tips with each other. Let's talk about this. And we spent probably 6 minutes talking about it, and it was probably the best 6 minutes we spent in the entire class so far, because students felt heard, they felt encouraged by each other, supported, and they seemed to be in a better frame of mind to talk about something as heady as the Drake equation. So I strongly recommend looking at the audience you have and making sense of it. I am not. So when you see students like this, you might want to address their needs and not pretend that they're listening to whatever it is that you're talking about. The second piece was actively engaging. This community knows a lot about that, but I wanted to emphasize reflection. A lot of young colleagues here are trying lots of things, and I encourage that. Please throw things at the wall, see what sticks. But we forget, why did we do this? Make time to reflect what worked of all the things that I threw at the wall and revisit that and say, okay, that was really good, that I need to chuck, that was garbage. It's good to remember that. What was news to me and maybe to no one else is the importance of emotions. Of course, we all want to feel good where we're learning. That makes sense. I get that. But I never treated emotions as data. This was news to me. And to imagine that we use emotions of your own and of your group to make decisions was interesting. One of the things I saw at the workshop was there was a lot of music used. For a university class, that's not a practice that I have had. But what I did in this occasion was I invited my students to bring music, 2 songs each, that make them feel belonging and alert. And I would start the class, before the class began, I would put at least one song that students volunteered, which makes them feel heard and that they have some agency to make the climate of our room what they want it to be and what's relevant to them. The other piece is that we learn from and with others. We are all, if not educators, we are certainly members of teams. And we've heard already today, not today, but we've heard about the value of yes and. I'm not going to belabor that. But the key indicator of what makes a good team is psychological safety. When people feel safe to say their opinion, either constructive feedback or maybe even, no, that doesn't fly really, trust me. We need to make that be mindful of how to make people belong in our communities. Part of that is bringing one's authentic self. I have found that as a bilingual person, sometimes I open my mouth and out comes Greek. And at first, I really worked hard so that didn't happen, and now I'm more relaxed about it. If it happens, I pause and I acknowledge that some of you might know when you speak 2 languages, sometimes you get something else pops up, and that's okay. And to allow ourselves to bring that second language in the room, to allow it to be okay that there are other people out here who speak second languages, and maybe even English is not your first language, as is true for me, is okay. And allowing that, I think, is important. The second piece that I'm going to talk about, so far I've talked about developing community and culture, and we all need to get better at that. Finding and scoping problems. We need to be able to find a problem, to find a bug in our life or in our work. We need often a different perspective, and that's hard because we live in our own perspectives. And one of the assignments we had was we were given a different identity, and I was told I'm the architect. I loved it. I walked around Stanford, and I was told, sketch things you like, find things that are different. And obviously, I'm not very gifted in sketching, but it gave me opportunities to look at things in careful ways that I would not have otherwise. One of the people was assigned the identity of being a person in a wheelchair, and boy, did they see different things that they might have done otherwise. Try it with your team. We use a lot of assumptions in our daily life, and a lot of that is a useful shortcut, but often they're wrong. We were told if you have a problem and a solution, write down all the assumptions that you've made and see if you can challenge those assumptions. One of our exercises was to pair with a colleague, and from different disciplines. I was talking to a marketing expert, and I had written down all the assumptions I've made about marketing experts, good with people, goal-oriented, afraid of math. It turns out that the woman across from me was a trained engineer, and she loved math. And very quickly, our conversation got deep about religion and culture and things that matter to us. Having that conversation, you usually start it with, and let me give you a recipe. You don't say, oh, you're an engineer, I guess you're afraid of math. You can say, in my experience, people in marketing have been afraid of math. What are your thoughts about that? How do you respond to that? That is a friendlier way to bring something that they might be very tired of hearing or having assumed about them. How are we doing for time? Oh, that's great. Thank you. Another one of framing problems is the language that we use, how we communicate it. Often our language of framing of problem embeds the imagined solution. So for example, we were told, please draw a vase, or vase, or however you say it, vaso. That is something that my vase looked like. And then we were asked to draw how we enjoy flowers in our home. I didn't draw a vase. I didn't draw this either, but it opened real other possibilities. I used to ask my astronomy students to draw a night sky. I'd give them these cool black pieces of paper and white pencils and watch them go to town. I don't do that now. I say, please draw yourself enjoying a night sky. Now I see people in the picture. I see buildings from their communities. It's much more grounded, and it involves them in the picture. If there's two things that you take from my talk, this is one of the things I'd like you to take. The third piece is putting these ideas in practice, given that the fifth day of the conference was to subvert how to change the place you work at. We were advised to start small, teeny, small. They said it many times. The idea being is that sometimes we have these big ideas and we say we're going to start that some other time. We were told, look at your calendar. What are you doing first thing you're going back to work? For me, it was Monday morning. What's your meeting? What are you going to try and change? We're going to try and play with. And for me, I had a meeting with an undergraduate student staff who is a designer, who have in the past have issues communicating with. I use words she doesn't understand. She uses words I don't understand. So I decided to model. She said something, I would repeat it in my words and see if we communicated. And since subsequently our communications have been much better, I try and give her agency to say explicitly, I admire what you're doing. Please take control. Tell me what you think the aesthetic of this ought to be. My last item is this. You probably have a local entrepreneurship or innovation center, either on your campus if you work at a university or close to a university or any kind of town of a certain size. People want to work with you. These are going to be people with whom you can innovate something and try something new. Find your people. Planetarium people, by definition, are innovators. Even if you are a vendor, they'll want to talk to you. So my email there, and Robin, my collaborator, is here as well in spirit. So if you would like to talk to me after the question period, I'd be very happy to talk with any and all of you. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you, Jean. Do we have any questions for Jean?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Back to the choosing music. Are you completely open to any choice whatsoever? And is it
Any
every
whatsoever.
single
There are
class?
adults in the room.
So if you're walking into headbanging, ear-splitting volume that day, that is what the day is. Or if it's classical,
My setup does not allow for ear-shattering sound. I just don't have the volume. So that's okay. I thought you were going to language issues. Adults in the room. Frankly, most of the music is in a different language. Most of the music that was given to me is in Arabic. I have a lot of Muslim students in my class.
Got one over here.
And of course, I bring in my Greek music.
So I actually was having a bit of a discussion about this earlier, but I have a lot of friends who are flat earthers, and they are actually very intelligent people. But I always think that their trouble is, I always think like the Mighty Ducks. If everyone's seen that movie, in the beginning, there's this troubled kid who's causing trouble, and then the teacher sees value in him and makes something more out of him. And that's how I see the flat earthers, where some of them are brilliant, they're savants, but they're trying to create a pretzel logic in something that doesn't need it. And it's something that I find is, instead of attacking them, I try to kind of work them through the actual physics and all this stuff. They go through it pretty well, trying to take that energy away from something that I think is just, kind of like a kid trying to throw a hockey puck through a window is kind of what they're trying to do. Redirect that energy. You're actually you're a brilliant person. You just need to redirect that. And I'm wondering if that relates at all to something that you've seen in dealing with other cultures.
I think the important piece when you're talking to someone who has a very different perspective is to find what you have in common. So people you're describing are curious, right? So if we start working with that premise, that we're curious about how this works, trying to discuss, so what evidence would you need to see to decide that the idea that you come up with isn't what's best describing reality? If the answer to that is there is nothing you can tell me that will change my mind, then you know that this is not going to be a fruitful conversation. If people are willing to accept that this is the kind of evidence I'm looking for, then you can start talking based on that. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think finding those assumptions, like what are the values that we can both get behind, is, I find, a useful place to start.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry, guys. We need to get on to our next speaker, so if you want to continue the conversation after, that's
And I would
fantastic.
love to. Please come and talk to
Yeah,
me.
please
Thank
do.
you so
Another round
much.
of applause for Jean. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next speaker from the Lake Erie Nature and Science Center, we have Katy Downing. Please give her a nice welcome.
Awesome. There we go. Hello. I am Katy Downing. I am the Planetarium and Programming Coordinator at Lake Erie Nature and Science Center. We are a 30-foot dome on the west side of Cleveland. We're actually in Bay Village. And we are a nature center and preschool. So a lot of our shows that we do in our planetarium are geared more towards the preschool age. So I wanted to share with you one of our most popular shows, not the most popular show, that was a few years ago, called Twinkle Tots. But the second most popular show is called Stellar Stars. And it is, it's literally a blast. And it is one show that we have kids and families coming back year after year and week after week. And people remember it for a very long time. So I wanted to share with you just a little bit about what it was, what we do, what it looks like now, and maybe you want to try it in your dome. I don't know. So Stellar Stars has been in our planetarium long before I started, and it will continue long after I am there. We recommend it for ages 3 to 7 years old, and the only bit of information that the public gets from it is this little line that says, blast off and travel through space as you visit different destinations in the solar system and learn about constellations in the night sky. Like, that's it. That is our whole description. But it is the most popular show. As you can see, I left a little bit of our the rest of our schedule there because we like alliterations. So we have Twinkle Tots, Stellar Stars, and mini missions. Not to be confused with the preschool programs, which are Nature Nuts and Forest Friends, and we got a lot of alliterations going on. So Stellar Stars. There are 12 different shows for Stellar Stars, and it is the same show right now, if the schedule stays the same. It is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. So we do the same show 4 times, and then switch to the new topic on Mondays. So kids have the whole week to come and see the different topics. And they, sometimes, some days have a lot of kids, some days don't have a lot of kids. It's just how things work. Now that we're out of summer, we have a lot of really young 3s and 4s coming. So it's a different dynamic, like you all know, the ebb and flow of summer versus school year. So the show starts out, I literally just took pictures in my dome one day during the show. Um, the show starts out with a view of the solar system. And we spend about 10 minutes talking about what the solar system is and what it isn't. We make sure to point out that the sun is the only star in the solar system. The stars you see at nighttime are not part of the solar system, and that right there is mind-blowing to most of the parents, let alone the kids. We talk about what the green lines in these pictures represent, because usually when you think of space, there's not like lines floating all over the place. So we spend a long time talking about what the solar system is. We find planet Earth, we wave hi at the Earth, and we are ready to go. Now remember, we're 3 to 7 years old, so you have to buckle your pretend seatbelts, you have to put on your pretend space helmets, and then using Uniview, we blast off and go to the planet of the day. The show most recently was Jupiter, so there is Jupiter. Yay. The introduction is about 10 minutes long, and then we spend another 5 to 10 minutes, depending on audience interest. If they're really squirrely, it's more like 5 minutes. If they are really into it, I can go 15 minutes on the planet, and we compare it. We see, is it bigger than Earth? Is it smaller than Earth? Is it hotter than Earth? Colder? What's it made out of? And we also include a lot of images of like missions that have been to those planets. So there's our moons of Jupiter shown in Uniview. Some shows we have more images for, and like I think I got one new image for the Neptune show from the new James Webb image of Neptune, but other than that, not much images. So some shows definitely go longer than others. We always talk about if you want to celebrate your birthday on the planet. Kids really want to celebrate their birthday on Mercury because it is a lot of cake, but nobody wants to celebrate their birthday on Neptune, and that's understandable. And we also talk about moons and things like that. Now, I know you're wondering, well, what about the current robotic spacecraft that have been to all these different places? Well, you have to grow up a little bit, and you have to come to mini missions to learn about the robotic spacecraft. Stellar Stars is purely just what is the planet like, how does it compare to Earth, and seeing some really cool images. We can fly into like Saturn's rings and all sorts of things like that. So after we spend time talking about the planet, we head back home. I never tell them where home is. We always end up back at the Earth, and I always ask if they've been to Earth. And a lot of kids say no. So I think my planetarium is frequented by aliens, just saying. But then we land on the Earth, and we look up at this current sky. Sometimes we find the moon there. That's surprising to parents, too. And then we find the constellation of the day. So the constellation of the day is, how I explain it to the Stellar Stars kids, is the goal of Stellar Stars is to introduce you to as many constellations as possible. Some of them you've heard of. Some of them you question if I made them up right now. And sometimes, they recognize Orion, they recognize the Dippers, and then I, show them the triangle, and they're like, I don't know, it's fish. No, it's a triangle. That's all it is. And we tell age-appropriate stories. We alter our stories quite a bit. We don't get into a lot of things. Poseidon writes letters to his friend, and Delphinus brings her over for juice and cookies. There's like... There's none. They're friends. It's mutual. We also make up a lot of morals for our characters to learn. I think Capricornus learns that he should not run away from his farmer, and because he ran away, he's stuck as a fish. So our stories are not true to the mythology, but they are appropriate for 3 to 7 year olds. So it's a lot of fun, and the kids really get into it. We have them making sound effects and all sorts of things like that. Now, how do we get them to come back? Okay, you saw the Jupiter show. How do you come back? Well, at the end of the show, you get your Stellar Stars passport. This was made by our marketing department. And you collect a sticker for every planet that you learn about. Now, when I came into the planetarium 10 years ago, we had this stack of stickers that were all the sun and all the planets in the solar system, no asteroid and no comet, so those are just sparkly stars. We're running out of stickers. So we're going to have to switch to stamps eventually, but we still have some stickers. And this passport, I get phone calls. We lost our passport. Can we get another one? We missed Saturn. Some people leave their passports in their glove boxes so that when they come back, they have it with them, because collecting the sticker is the thing for the kids. Some kids are about the planet. Some kids are like, I need my sticker. So when they finish the all 12 stickers, because it's all the planets, the sun, asteroids, dwarf planets, and comets. So when they get all 12 stickers, they get a little prize bag that is filled. It's usually one of our drawstring bags with our logo. And we end up putting NASA stickers and crayons, whatever else we can find that's got NASA or space on it goes into the bag. The one Friday after Thanksgiving, it's traditionally celebrated as Black Friday, and people go shopping. We celebrate Black Hole Friday. So there's a 13th sticker you could get if you come to the Black Hole Friday on the one day a year. So that one's really fun, and you get a little extra goodie bag. Here are the coloring pictures that kids can take home with them. We've got coloring pictures for the constellations and the planets. And then this was the thing I really wanted to get to. We have an annual attendance of about 10,000 people just coming organically to our public shows. And you can see in the tally giveaway, or the giveaway tally, that 2018 to 2019, we had 30 kids finish their 12-show passport, which was incredible. I lost some data. I lost a piece of paper. But we're back up to 15 now, so it's really exciting. And then I will leave you with, this is our schedule. We plan it out a year in advance with all of our topics and all of our constellations that are in the nighttime sky. So I hope I've inspired you to maybe try doing some planet shows for the 3 to 7 year age range. They are not scary. They are hilarious and fun. So I would love to answer any questions you have about it. But this is Stellar Stars.
Perfect. Well, we do have a couple of minutes for questions. I'm going to ask our next speaker to come up and get set up. Do we have any questions for Katy? I see one over here.
Would you be willing to share those child-friendly stories with us? Because those sound fantastic.
They exist completely in my head right now.
Ooh, okay.
But I have been, these coloring pictures, I have wanted to put stories on the back of them so that they can take them home with them. So when I do eventually do that, I will, of course, share the child-appropriate stories that I totally made up.
Okay, I think we have time for one more. Any other questions for Katy? Oh, we're doing all right. All right. Well, thank you very much, Katy.
Thank you.
All right, I'll introduce our next speaker. This is from High Point University. Please welcome Erin Brady.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Erin, and so I'm going to be talking about theater within the planetarium and what are some things that you can do to help turn your planetarium into a functioning performing arts venue, since they're not designed for that kind of theater at all. But that is not to say that a planetarium isn't already a performing arts venue. Some have the word theater in their title, but even beyond that, any show you're giving in your planetarium, you have to have a level of performance to it. To get your important ideas and concepts across, you have to be engaging to get your audience involved, and so you have to be a little bit entertaining as well. But even before you get to the show itself, when you're developing the show, you're making artistic choices of what am I going to view on the dome? Where is it going to be placed? How am I going to make this next transition and have it be aesthetically pleasing? So with that in mind, it really isn't too difficult to already find theater within the planetarium itself. And so over the last 3 years, we had 3 different types of events in our planetarium, and so I'm going to be talking about them in reference to levels since they got increasingly more difficult. So the first one was a dramatic reading, the second was a theater production, and the last and most recent one that we had was an opera performance. And so I'll go into a little bit more detail about what that specific performance was, but on each one I will also highlight what went into making it possible. So what was the time commitment as far as rehearsals in the planetarium? How was the planetarium used? Was there any dome content that was needed? Who was responsible for creating that? And lastly, what to consider when you're going into doing an event like this if you are interested in it. And that's just a really nice way to phrase, here are some things that we learned the hard way. So the very first event that we had was a dramatic reading of the play Copenhagen by Michael Frey. And so it centers on Heisenberg, Bohr, and Bohr's wife. They meet up after their death to talk about their attendance at the 1941 Copenhagen meeting about nuclear powers. And so this was entirely student-led and produced, actors, all of the above. And the planetarium was used primarily as an interesting location. Similar to having theater outside, it just helps to create the atmosphere about the story that they are telling. So this was the easiest experience for all of us because it was about a week of rehearsals in the space since they weren't memorizing lines, they weren't moving around a whole lot. On that previous slide, you did see a student behind the dome. So there was a single scene where they had to just flip on our work lights behind the dome to make that possible. Again, very easy to accomplish. We only used a chromacone lighting ring for our main light source within the planetarium, no other dome content necessary. But we had the biggest lesson learned here. So if you take a look at the image on the screen, we have our actors down on that very bottom level in front of the dome. And so for anybody sitting in the seats, if you weren't sitting basically straight up or a little forward, you couldn't see them very well. So this eventually led to the question of where should performers be located so you can actually see them in the audience. And so a lot of things to consider about your own dome in that. Is it tilted, non-tilted? What is your seating like? Where are projectors located? And so for us, that led to the installation of a platform in that space instead, which was key for the theater production, and it's still up today because our faculty actually like lecturing from there to be able to see their students as they're talking to them. So the second event that we had was an original theater production written by one of our faculty on campus, and it went through a few different iterations. The first one was called Time, and then there were some workshop performances with minor changes afterwards, and then a major reworking a year later called Time Like Water. So at the heart of this production, it is an immersive experience. So as the audience member, you are attending a wedding in a planetarium, and then the production takes place. And so it centers on the themes of time and space, love, and looking at the relationship between people, specifically a father and a daughter. And so as you can see, they primarily use the structure of the planetarium to help tell this story. We had a lot of activity going on behind the dome as well as inside the dome itself. And so in that very first run through called Time, there were a lot of flashback scenes to recent past or the distant past. And so using those different structures behind the dome, each one was assigned a time period as well as a color, and then a varying level of how populated was a star field to help make those transitions in time. And there were also a few scenes about an astronomy class, and so you're sitting there, you got to see short 1 to 2 minute visual shows related to the topics that the professor was talking about, theories of time. I'm just going to flip it over really quick. Absolutely. Sorry. No problem. Should I keep talking?
If you
I can
like
keep
to.
talking. Okay.
Don't pay attention to me. Pay attention to her.
In the rework of it, they still used those levels behind the dome, but it was a less rigid breakdown of this is specifically this period of time. And so you could see present day characters on any level, not only to show their physical distance, but also their mental and emotional disconnects that they were having. And then finally, we got to have our pre-show and post-show experiences. So you got to see a little bit behind the curtain with the wedding party getting ready, and then you joined them afterwards for a post-ceremony reception down the hall. And so I personally worked with this theater group for every iteration that they had, and so I got to know them very well, and we learned a lot of things each time that we went through this production. So it was about a month overall every time that it went through, and they only used the rehearsal space at night, so it worked really well around our daytime class schedule. And I only created those short astronomy class pieces. Other than that, I was able to train a student each year to be able to do the basic operations of our system. So between 2 one-hour sessions, they learned how to operate our system just enough, enough information about our scripting program so that they were developing the script themselves, how to use the Chroma Cove software to create their own LED lights. So they had a lot of ownership over what they were creating as a technical theater student, which is key to them. And lastly, because it is a theater event, we're not set up for theater in a planetarium, they had to bring in their own equipment. So having enough time up front to troubleshoot these problems that inevitably will arise are gonna save you a lot of grief later on, where in tech rehearsals, you have to go through every single scene to figure out what exactly is happening. You don't wanna be troubleshooting in those moments. That being said, we had to find locations where these pieces of equipment could be set up from those tech rehearsals through the very last performances that still allowed our planetarium to be functional overall. We still had shows going on in those other times when they weren't in there for rehearsal spaces. In a similar vein, we also had to have microphones on every single actor because they were all over the planetarium and you wanted to be able to hear them clearly. So luckily, we were able to tap into our existing audio system, so we didn't have even more equipment coming into our space. And the last and most recent event that we had was the premiere of a brand new opera designed specifically to be performed in a planetarium. And so the story of this opera focuses on a young girl named Eden who dreams of being the very first person to land on Mars. After she unexpectedly loses her mother, she goes on this journey through time and space, meeting these famous female scientists throughout history whose discoveries were actually a major part in making the journey to Mars possible. I could talk all day about this opera, but that is the only summary I'll give you right now. And so because it was performed specifically in a planetarium, it relied on dome content to tell the story, as much as you're relying on the singers as well as the musicians. And yes, we had live musicians at every single performance, and again, that is a whole separate story of how we really made that possible that we won't get into right now. So focusing on the use of the dome with telling the story, they had a lot of moments where they were dynamically interacting with the different graphics on the dome. So for example, there's a song about polynomials and they're missing a specific equation that was needed to make their flying machine actually fly. And so as they're working together, they're able to bring in this new equation on the dome. You see it fly in. With another gesture of the hand, it starts to rearrange itself into the shape of a plane until it is finally realized into their flying machine. And that helps take them on this journey that they go on and you're transported to with lifting off the Earth and seeing the content on the dome change. It was also used for creating some general scenery backdrops so that you're able to connect these famous female scientists into their time and place, where were they doing their work, and creating overall scenery that you're not intentionally immersed into, but under the dome as well. So luckily, there were only about 3 weeks of rehearsal for this opera. They had 2 rehearsals a day. One of them was somewhere else on campus, and only one of them was in the planetarium. So it was easy to fit in around our class schedule that we have all throughout the semester. All of the dome content was scripted. So because of the reliance on using the dome for everything, all of it had to be programmed out, and it was done ahead of time so that there was enough time to make changes later on. So using a cue sheet was really helpful. So it breaks down every single scene, sometimes even by line, about what exactly needs to be happening for all functioning pieces of equipment related to the production. So our director was able to use that to plan out when should pauses be in the script, so you're holding on a scene. When do you need to rapidly plan out these changes that are going to happen on the dome to a specific time to line up with the score? There were a lot of things that we learned throughout this opera, but one of them that kind of snuck up on us was the need for external spaces as well as the planetarium space. So the cast and crew need things for storage, such as for their props, their costumes, for storing pieces of equipment, dressing rooms to get into said costumes, but also to leave their valuables during performances. If we had a larger cast, we would have probably needed a green room for people who are not performing to stay in while they're off stage, things of that nature. So all in all, from the most simple performance to the most intricate production, it is entirely possible to have a theater production within the planetarium. It takes a little bit of effort to find those workarounds for the disconnects between we are very dark and they need to actually be seen and have some light in there as well. But it is very much possible, and it is really exciting for everybody involved, from the theater group getting to work in a non-traditional space, for for the audience getting to see something different in the planetarium that's not necessarily astronomy related, but also for the planetarium staff. I enjoyed every single time that I worked with this group, that I assisted with the opera, and it has really shaped our perspective in our planetarium in thinking about what other ways can we be an interdisciplinary space. So, thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Erin. Do we have any questions for Erin? I see one here, and then we'll come here.
Thanks. Amazing. I'm really kind of jealous. I want to work at your planetarium. But you must be in a unique situation. What is your access to getting those actors behind the dome?
Yep.
Especially at those different levels.
We are quite fortunate that we have a lot of behind the dome space. So we have regular access doors on the main level that are rather quite wide. And then we have ladders that go up to the second level catwalk that you saw, but we also have a main level entrance. Unfortunately, it's through a bathroom stall, but we're able to work around that issue. The very highest level is only accessible by a ladder, but again, and that was probably the most narrow, but that was the least used space.
Cool, thanks.
All right, Jean was next. I see one over there as well.
What a great project. My question is, how do the actors feel about the attention being diverted from the actor to whatever is happening on the dome? How did you deal with that tension?
So it varied by the type of event that we had. So specifically with the theater production, they didn't use a lot of content on the dome. It was something interesting, but the only moments where there was activity happening were for those astronomy classes, and it was the intent for the dome to take its moment to shine, and that the actors are kind of sitting and listening to this class anyway, and so there wasn't a competition between where you should be looking. In the opera itself, you do have the interaction between the singers and the dome, so any changes happening on the dome are intentional with their moments of relating to them and how they would be mentioning something and then something would happen. So you're not having this competing moment when you should be following the direction the singer is walking and something is happening on the dome instead, so you're looking between two places.
One more over here.
You might have already said this, Erin, so forgive me, but did you guys, was this initiated by the planetarium, or did you have the theater bringing you content and asking if they could do it in the dome?
So we were approached by the theater department. The professor had seen the space, was immediately inspired to write something specifically for the planetarium, and so then we began that discussion with him. Our director is very musically inclined himself. He almost went to school to be a composer instead of an astrophysicist, so we naturally have that love for the arts. And then for the opera, he was approached by somebody in the music department who has ties to the opera world, saying, hey, we want to make a science-based opera. Are you interested? And it got started from there.
All right, thanks. Another round of applause for Erin. Great job. Diana Yoder is from Digitalis Education Solutions and from the Boonshoft Museum of Discovery. There we go. All right, big round of applause for
All right. Hello, everyone. Let's see. I'm not used to microphones. There we go. I'm just going to hold this one. So I am Diana. I'm going to be presenting a talk on meeting standards in the dome. And before we get started, I want to give a disclaimer. I'm not formally trained in curriculum. Since I started in planetariums about 7 years ago, I've been trying to bring standards into our museum shows. And I just wanted to share with you some of the things I've learned over the time, and hopefully some of you will be able to take some notes and learn a thing or two to bring those standards into your domes as well. So first of all, why meet standards? Why should we be doing this? In my opinion, standards link formal and informal education. It helps to bring those students from the classroom into your dome, and it gives value for the administrators and teachers to approve the requests to bring those students to your dome, because it takes time, energy, effort. Even if your programs are free, it's a lot of work for those schools to get to you unless you happen to live inside of their school, which that's true for some of you. But in general, meeting standards is just going to be a great way to get more students into your dome. And there's a couple ways to do that. The two I'm going to be talking today are NGSS, the Next Generation Science Standards, versus state standards in general. Now, I'm more familiar with Ohio. That's what I've been teaching for the last few years. So all my examples are for Ohio specifically, but this should be able to translate at least a little bit to your state as well. NGSS is great for really wide audiences. If you're close to a border, you might be getting students from states around you. It's really well documented online. There's some great resources available. And even if it's not your state's curriculum, it's probably going to be accepted by the teachers. A lot of states have informally addressed NGSS and that they accept those as valuable, which is really the whole point, even if they're not meeting the state requirements. Your state standards are great for your teachers in your region. They're all going to be teaching to those standards. And it's also likely well documented by people on your team. Hopefully you're not the first person in your institution to be doing standards or be bringing students into your dome. If that's true, then there's some more tips we need to get for you. But it's going to be really helpful in general, and the teachers are definitely going to be accepting those standards. When trying to pick, play to your strengths. What resources do you have available? Do you have that team that knows your state? Do you have a team that knows NGSS? Are you familiar with one already? So play to your strengths, and it'll work out. So I'm going to start with a solar system example for both NGSS and my state, Ohio. For Ohio, the state standards are usually found online with your state education department. That should be true for any state available, and it should be completely free for you to download and take a look at. In Ohio, our solar system example is going to fall under Earth and Space Sciences, or ESS. It's generally taught in the 5th grade, and it's the first topic they learn about in this section. So that's how we get the funny label 5ESS.1. I don't expect you to read all this. I included these just for reference so you have an idea of what they look like. There's a lot of content. It's really deep. But I'm just going to point out a few things. This is the grade 5 science standards. So all of the basic standards are listed on this page. You're going to look down at the bottom towards the condensed content statements. And that first one reads, the solar system includes the sun and all celestial bodies that orbit the sun. Each planet in the solar system has unique characteristics. Perfect topic for the planetarium. Great stuff to teach about. But in case you're not familiar, there are more resources available for you. Again, please don't read all of this. The content statement is expanded upon on the left. It tells you a little bit more about the details. And then there's the content elaboration, which tells you what the teachers are really looking to learn about. So there could be tons of really cool things about the solar system you want to teach, but that might not be what the teachers want to know. This will help you learn exactly what they want from you. And there's other cool stuff on here as well. Excuses to bring other grades to the same class, because we always want to be able to bring as many kids to the same program. We spend a lot of time on that program, use it for everybody. These are some excuses for you, how the other grades will relate to this statement as well. Now for the next generation science standards, also freely available online. That's a really cool browsable website. You can search for lots of things at once, narrow it down to different topics. It's really useful. Solar system is also ESS. This time, though, it's taught in middle school, usually 6th or 7th grade. So they get the middle school MS.ESS 1-1 through 1-3 for all of their space sciences together. Taking a look at 1-3, again, lots of content. Narrowing it down, the simple line for this standard, analyze and interpret data to determine scale properties of objects in the solar system. Perfect. Lots of great content there. It is written a little differently. It's more like an objective for your students to be able to accomplish. Once they learn the standard, that's what they should be able to do with it. The disciplinary core ideas is also really useful for expanding across the grade levels, gives you a more general idea of what they're trying to teach. But also each standard has evidence statements as well, which breaks it down even further, just like the Ohio one did. Our middle section is expanding on the content, and once again, telling you exactly what the teachers want you to be telling their kids. So again, NGSS versus state, they're both great. Play to your strengths. Which one do you think you'll be able to get more resources for, and which ones will be able to just help you and your region better? If you can apply both, that's great. If not, that's okay. Now, the other problem is there's not that many astronomy standards. It's very limited. So we do have to get creative. So for example, any physics topic is going to be great in your planetarium. Get creative, look for other things. Gravity, light, energy were just the first three I thought of. They're great ways. You can look at those standards, figure out what the kids need to learn, and just apply it in a different way. For example, light. The first grade NGSS standard is simply make observations to construct an evidence-based account that objects in darkness can be seen only when illuminated. Really fancy way to say you need light to see. Great astronomy topic. It goes into more detail. You want to take a look at things with light, things that create their own light, things that reflect light. All of that's written down in here in case you're not familiar with it. But the first thing I think about is just the sun makes light, the moon reflects light. Great way to go. Now, the next part, science and engineering practices, this is even more creative. These will apply to any topic that you can get creative with. So they're really focusing on ways to get the kids involved actively in their learning. Let me make sure. So these are the 8 essential practices for all students in all grades to learn about. If you can get any of these action verbs to apply to your program, you can use these standards as an excuse to get students into your dome. Ask questions, develop, plan, analyze, use. Just get the students involved as much as possible to get those science and engineering practices. They are harder to teach because student interaction is critical. You can't just lecture to them. They have to be involved in the process. Otherwise, your teachers are going to get very mad at you for saying they met these standards when the kids didn't get involved in the process. So make sure you're careful there. But a good fun one would be, is this planet habitable? Spend time teaching them about what it makes a planet habitable, and then get the kids to answer questions and find out whether or not this one actually is. So that can lead to a lot of fun stuff. And I know you've heard about it before, but don't recreate the wheel, use your resources. The GLPA Education Board has just created this educator's handbook. Use it, it's online, downloadable. We've got all the NGSS standards in here, but also you can make notes, you can change it, add your own thoughts and programs, and then share it back with us, yeah. And that way, if you share it back with us, we can share it to everyone else and make more awesome resources for you all to share. That was that slide. And then, of course, talk more about it with us. Join us for the PLC, Professional Learning Chat, every second Tuesday of the month, except this month, at 4 p.m. Eastern. Will be a Zoom link. It's usually a pretty small group, but we'd love to just have great conversations with you about different topics. So with that, thanks for listening and happy teaching.
Perfect. Thanks, Diana. Do we have any questions about that? I see one here, and then we'll come.
First of all, I really have to applaud that handbook. That is such a genius idea.
Peggy was the lead over there. She did a great job.
Absolutely phenomenal. Especially in situations like in our part, we're starting a new planetarium, mobile planetarium, all that. This is like just jumps us light years ahead by having that at our disposal. One thing I would love to see too in the future, I mean, this is already great, but would be things like recommended shows or areas of the different platforms, Digitalis, Digistar, for this part of the handbook guide, this topic. This is where you can actually find a show or a curriculum item in these different materials. I know that'd be hard to keep up to date, but that would be also a future expansion idea.
No, that's a fantastic idea. It's something that I was trying to put together at my last museums. I'd always be writing, these are the shows we play, these are the standards they address, and if we can work together and share them with each other, that would be fantastic. I think working with the education chair and combining maybe a new tab that just references our full dome shows and how they can help you, that would be a great addition to the project.
Over here.
Thank you. This is awesome. And I just wanted to also add, and maybe you said this, so I apologize if I missed it, but a lot of the state standards are just repackaged NGSS anyway, so just make sure you're checking on that. And
And to the point of like what show matches with what standard, it would be great if show producers just make that a standard part of their process. And if you want help, we have GLPA education folks that can help with that. Thank you.
Yes, that's also a great idea. I will mention, if you were able to read anything from those slides, they were massive. Yeah, you can come over. Ohio is very much based off the NGSS. Like the grade change is very minimal, doesn't make much of a change for a planetarium show. Should be able to teach to 5th graders and 7th graders at the same time. But that should be true for lots of states.
Diana, that was wonderful. I would like to remind everybody that there are lots of other standards that are for other subjects. Multidiscipline things are important. And for example, my planetarium was disbanded last year because of mold in the building. I'm working with Katy to do some programs. But one program that's very popular for our 4th grade is in Black History Month. And we do Follow the Drinking Gourd. Now, some people have found some problems with Jeanette Winter's book, but there are many, many other things that can be brought to bear that are really grounded in good research, that are good for social studies. And there are many other things that we can do. We heard about music today and drama and so on. There are things in other curricula with music and so on that are standards. And you can use those standards to put other things into your curriculum. Your planetarium curriculum blossoms when you have the opportunities to tell teachers, these are standards. They're not astronomy, but we can link it a little bit with astronomy, but really focus on those standards that are in your subjects, and it's really a good thing.
Yes, that's a very excellent point to make. I'm more familiar with the science ones. That's just what I've been able to study more. But if we have any experts in non-science standards, that would be a great way. You can jump in with the education board and work on sharing those resources. That would be great.
All right, thanks for all the questions, and thank you, Diana. All right, now for our last and certainly not least speaker of this session, from the Bell Museum, Sally Brummel.
Thank you. So who is coming to your planetarium? Who is not coming? How might you find out? And once you do know, what would you do with those results? So this presentation is based on a paper that is in the current issue of the Planetarium. And we co-wrote it with our evaluation partners, Catalyst Consulting. So if you want to dig deeper into data and charts and statistics and methods and all of that, you can go to the Z link, or that's how we do our shortened links at the university, or this QR code, z.umn.edu/GLPA 2022. I will put this up again at the end also, but it will have the Planetarium article, the paper I wrote for these proceedings, and this presentation too. So we have an award from NASA to produce a recorded full-dome planetarium show called Mars: The Ultimate Voyage. And it's about keeping astronauts healthy, safe, motivated on the trip to Mars and back. We also are developing a toolkit of activities. Thanks to those of you who are helping us review them. Both will be available free of charge to planetariums and other institutions nationwide. That's a topic for a presentation at a future conference. But when we were writing the proposal for NASA, they asked for demographics, specific information, and benchmarks for the communities you're going to serve. We don't have an internal evaluation team. We don't have that specific demographics. We looked to see if maybe there was something in the planetarium field that gave us those demographics. And we know that other informal science institutions have done such studies. We didn't find any. I know Carolyn Sumner's reported at Immersa. Those statistics don't exist. If there's something out there that any of you know of, please let us know. We'd be happy to look at it. But we decided to use this as an opportunity to write a demographic study into the grant to just start to fill in that gap. So the grant period started July 2020, and we were going to survey audiences in 5 planetariums from each of the 7 regions across the country, and then there were no audiences in any planetariums. So we shifted to an online study. We selected 1 planetarium from each of the regions and sent an online survey to their email or member listservs, and also purchased responses from SurveyMonkey audience to serve as a comparison for each region. We started with the Bell Museum in the GLPA region, just to get any kinks out from this, because nobody on our team had done any sort of a survey like this before. And the other selected planetariums were at Pierce College in Washington, Fort Collins Museum of Discovery, Valley Planetarium in Kansas City, Missouri, the Raritan Valley Community College, Branchburg, New Jersey, Houston Museum of Natural Science, and the South Carolina State Museum in Columbia. So when we got to these email serves and the SurveyMonkey responses, we asked for basic demographic information and what kind of cultural institutions they visit, a rating of their interest in science, and we also added on some information about attitudes toward visiting with regards to COVID. That's not in this paper, but we do have that data out there. So altogether, we sent out surveys to over 16,000 people, and we got a response rate of about 11%. Over 1,800 people responded. And then we purchased 100 responses from cities near each of those regions and got 672 completed surveys from there. So once we had all of that in, and I will have to admit, when I say we, I say mostly Catalyst Consulting, the evaluation group, did the majority of this research. Like I said, Bell does not have an internal evaluation team. So once we had everything, we decided these are the 2 research questions to focus on. What are the demographics of people who do and don't come to the planetariums? And then is there anything else we can learn when we look at those demographics through an intersectional lens? So let's just start with the demographics. The vast majority of the sample completing both surveys was female, white, with moderate to high income, and at least a college degree. And so you can see from this chart all the way to the left, the middle bar, the orange one, is the planetarium listservs, the single highest demographic category out of all of those. Over 81% of the respondents were white from the planetarium listserv. Even in the community sample, it was high, but that also tends to be skewed in that type of a survey. But so again, the preceding paper has much more of the breakdown of the demographics of people who answered the survey, but we really should not be surprised at that lack of inclusion. So then to further analyze this, we decided to combine all of the responses together. Didn't matter the region, didn't matter if they were part of the email listserv or SurveyMonkey audience. We broke them down into were they visitors or not visitors. So this set of charts for just a sampling of the categories there. Each stack has on the bottom, which is in blue, that's the number or the percentage of non-visitors. And then the top of each stack, which is in orange, that's the people who did visit. So overall, over about 52% of all respondents had visited a planetarium in 2019 or 2020. Again, 2020 really hurts things here, but that's why we went back a year to see what people had done in 2019. And overall there weren't many differences based on race and ethnicity. Slightly more than 50% of white respondents were visitors and slightly less in the other racial categories. Less than half of the people in the 3 lowest categories of education were visitors and more than half in the 3 highest levels. And as income rose, people were more likely to be visitors. And all of this replicates results from other informal learning contexts. For now, we are looking into seeing what kind of patterns emerge when you're looking through the lens of intersectionality. So the idea that human characteristics such as race or ethnicity, age, gender, socioeconomic status, they're not mutually exclusive within a person, but they work in context with and sometimes against one another and should be treated as such. So from the results we got here, what we chose to report on were the 8 intersectional groups shown here. Asian or Asian American male, Hispanic female or Latina, Black or African American male, Asian or Asian American female, Black or African American female, Hispanic male or Latino, white female or white male. And the reason we brought those out was for a couple things. One is that those do include audiences that informal science institutions prioritize when they're trying to broaden who comes to their institution. And they also had sample sizes of over 20 for this survey. So then, well, the question is now what? What do we do with these results? So we didn't set out to do an intersectional analysis. We didn't follow advice that's in the literature to plan for this and do some sampling of key groups. So this study, what I'm showing here is not, okay, here's who does and doesn't visit planetariums. This is just what we got from this survey. It won't give us any definitive trends for the Bell Museum or the other 6 planetariums or the field in general to explore. That's not the takeaway from this study here. It's now an idea, okay, how can we do this for our own communities? How can we learn about who is and who isn't coming and identify specific groups who you might want to partner with to learn more about why they aren't coming. For example, if this were one of the planetariums individually out there, why are most Hispanic men choosing to visit while most Hispanic women are not? So that might be a really interesting thing for a planetarium to study if they got these results. So then the next, now what? Oh, this is an interesting thing. So there was a good interest in science. I want to leave this for you to look at in the paper, but it shows us that whether people were on the email listservs or the community, or visitors, non-visitors, there was a level of interest in science. So it's not the content that's keeping them from coming. So we have to figure out what is it. If you're interested in science but not coming, what is it that's keeping you away? All right, so now what for the Bell? We're using this study, we're using our diversity, equity, action, and inclusion plan to help us inform future decisions. And so this is our commitments to understand and acknowledge the history and current practices of museums and understanding where systematic racism is playing a role. Improving our programs to amplify voices of those who usually aren't heard. Creating an inclusive environment for all who intersect with the museum in any way. And then continually examining and challenging our own assumptions and biases. So there are a few things that we've been working on, I really think reflect that, and it has a lot to do with not creating content for the people you want to come, creating the content with them. So I worked with an Ojibwe STEM camp on the Fond du Lac Reservation to create a planetarium show. It was to make a model of a reciprocal collaboration. You know, how can different institutions work together? And although the grant period is over, the planetarium show went on in September. If I don't keep the partnership going, the project wasn't a success. We'll be starting our portable program again next spring, but we're not just going to say, here are our shows, schedule us, or come to you. We're going to be targeting very specific communities and not just by geography. We're going to leverage the platform of our Explore Dome and astronomy content to support a wide range of knowledge and topics that reflect the intersectionality of Minnesota communities. So, and then last thing that we're doing is really getting into the idea of storytelling and visualization. This is another one I wish I had about an hour to talk with you about, but we're working with a department at the University of Minnesota called the Interactive Visualization Lab, who is working with the University of Minnesota's Native Canoe program that uses indigenous watercraft and traditional ecological knowledge associated with water and skies for teaching and experiential learning in collaboration with indigenous communities and Katniss partners. So they can't do the navigation out in their waters, so the IV Lab built a virtual way to do it, on a headset and physical items to be moving around and be able to see the landmarks out in the sky. Well, why do this inside a VR headset? Do it in the dome. So we've been working with them to actually bring the class in who's learning it to do it. We're demoing this in November. There's motion sensors in the dome. They're all going to work together to move things while standing in our dome to move this craft. So, I'm really excited that this demographic study and the projects we're doing are coming together to really help us be understanding how to be doing a better job with our content and our programming and our visitors. And of course, we don't have it all figured out. It's hard work. It's required an investment commitment from our administration and time and financial investment museum-wide. So again, if you'd like to go deeper into the details, you can find them at this link, z.umn.edu/GLPA 2020, or at that QR code. So yeah, I've got some time for questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful.
So looking at your graphs, it looked like one of the standout areas where there was this disproportionate element was in the income distribution and the education level distribution. And both of those seem like areas that are, obviously like the effects those have on other demographics sort of spiral outwards from them. But that, in some sense, those are ones that are best changed through like changing the just attitude around museum culture and potentially admission prices. Are those, how have those been looked at by your institution?
I was just reading last night some stakeholder information. We're doing a strategic planning and looking at what our visitors, members, et cetera, are keeping them from coming, and that is a huge one. It's too expensive. Parking is too expensive. Why isn't parking free? So we're addressing that. We do have a free admission policy for Indigenous people across the board, and we have a very low price membership opportunity, but everybody sees that as a barrier, so we're going to be jumping onto that.
I think we have time for one more. Anyone else? Yeah, Jean.
In my experience, when you try and get demographic information, the very people that you want to hear from don't want to share that information with you. How do you address that?
How do we address not being able to get the information from the people we want to get the information from? I don't have an answer for that. Like I said, I'm not even the one who led this study online. I mean, so does anybody here have any answer to that? How do you get information from people who don't want to get it? Yes. While you're bringing the microphone over, or is it,
I don't know if we have enough time for the discussion, but
let us know if you have any of that. Yes.
We'll give another big thank you to Sally. Great job. And keep it going for all of our speakers this morning. That was a great job by everybody. Thank you.